Thank you very much for this special invitation. And I'm very happy what you said. First, that we are friends, because that's true. Yeah. I think my friends in Israel, also Mr. Grauman, will say that I have a strong relationship. I will tell a little bit about my personal experience during my speech. And also that it's possible to speak frank and open, and not because we want to be harsh. But sometimes you are right. You see developments and the suffering of people where it's very difficult to find the right words. And this meeting in Hebron, I never said that Israel is a state with apartheid, never, because Israel is still today the only democratic state in the region. But I said what I saw in Hebron for the people, for the Palestinians. And I was on a corner where a mother lived with a handicapped son. And if the mother wants to go to the next medicine, to a doctor, it's necessary for her to say 48 hours before to the Israel Defense Forces, I want to leave my home because there are 2 gates direct at the house. And it's difficult for her to go with the son to the next doctor without a permission of the soldiers. And the young soldier told me that for him it's very, very difficult to do his duty in the Israel Defense Army in this point, and that he hopes that the time will come where this situation will be solved for the mother and also for everybody. And nobody, me personally, is not against that Jewish people are living in Hebron. But maybe it's naive, and maybe it's today it seems like a dream. I hope that it will be possible without this bad situation where people are enemies and not religious people from different parts of the world with different religions who live there. And not as an excuse for me. The first person who said that he feels something remembering on the apartheid system was Bishop Tutu, not me, and President Clinton. But you are right, if you are a German, sometimes it's very difficult to discuss. You are right, and I promised to Mr. Grauman I will be more careful. And he promised to me, no, he was very fair in the debate in Germany. So let's be also in the future friends and frank. Thanks a lot. So, Mr. Lauder, Monsieur de Rothschild, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for inviting me to the meeting of the Governing Board of the World Jewish Congress. Because of personal experiences, for me it is a very special moment to be here with you tonight. Perhaps I should begin my remarks by telling you something about myself. Because I belong to a generation who still has something typical German about it. The typically German aspect brings together totally incompatible things in a person's or in a family history. In my case, we have the family history of the mother of my grown-up daughter. Her great-grandparents, Hugo and Sarah Asch, were deported from Berlin in one of the last transports in 1944 to Auschwitz and murdered there. Before they died, Sarah Asch was a victim of Josef Mengeles' experiments. That at least is what we saw in the documents which my daughter and I found in Yad Vashem the year before last. The other part of what presumably not all that unusual a German family history is, represented by my father. That is to say, by my daughter's grandfather. Born in 1921, he wasn't one of the actual perpetrators himself, but he remained a committed National Socialist, a fascist, and Holocaust denier until the end of his life. Victims and deniers of Auschwitz in the same family. Even today, nearly 70 years after the end of the Nazi terror, this always reminds me that we cannot assume that historical facts alone will be enough to banish evil ideologies like anti-Semitism from our society. Instead, we continually need the active involvement of all enlightened members of our democratic society in order to prevent a return of the stereotypes, prejudices, and culture of hatred of anti-Semitism. For a long time, people in Germany tended to play down anti-Semitism. Democratic post-war Germany didn't want to be identified with it. And the undemocratic Eastern Germany, which made anti-fascism to a state doctrine, simply washed its hand off it. I can well remember how, when my generation was young, we came under surveillance by the intelligence service of Germany when we demonstrated in remembrance of the Reichspogromnacht in Night of Broken Glass on 9th of November, whilst Hitler's former bodyguards in the Leibstandarte SS Adolf Hitler were able to assemble nearby to where I lived for the annual get-together without any harassment. And even in the new millennium, people in Germany have tended to look away. When an apparently honorable liberal politician expressed anti-Semitic sentiments, ordinary members of respected society also dared to emerge from cover. And they always used the excuse that it's about freedom of opinion. I'm not being a racist, they say, but. And when a prominent member of the Central Council of the Jews in Germany gets into difficulties in his private life, it was amazing to see how many people just happen to make the point that he's a Jew, and he's a typical Jew. All of this shows us two things. Firstly, anti-Semitic sentiments are still to be found in our modern, enlightened society today. And secondly, they are not restricted to the margins of our society, but crop up where they are particularly dangerous at the heart of our society. So we shouldn't be surprised when we also find them, as has been the case in the disgusting anti-Semitic slogans heard in recent weeks at demonstrations against the war in Gaza, at the edges of our society. But the fight against anti-Semitism can only be successful if it is won at the center of our society. The real danger comes not out of young fundamentalists among our migration society. The real danger is if the center of the society is not answering adequately. So that is the reason why I am convinced that yesterday's demonstration was a necessary and hopeful signal. The German government, the parties forming the government, and the parties in opposition in the Bundestag all stand united on this issue. We will start it up to hatred and we will fight violence. So I welcome the sign of solidarity and friendship which we sent out yesterday at the rally held by the Central Council of Jews at the Brandenburg Gate. But the rally should not be an isolated event. It should highlight our conviction as demonstrants, a conviction with which we will need in the struggle which lies ahead of us. We must understand that anti-Semitism is not a problem of a minority. Anti-Semitism is hatred of human beings. It is a challenge to all of us. It is an attack on everything that is good in our society. It hits at the heart of democracy. Our Germany, which emerged following the mass murders by the Nazis, is rooted in the principle of never again. Our basic law, our constitution, begins with a clear and simple principle: human dignity shall be inviolable. This never again is the most important point of reference to existence in our society. Everyone who believes it must stand up against the contempt for others, which is hallmark of anti-Semitism. People of different faiths, different cultural traditions and nationalities, people with very different lifestyles must be able to continue to live together in Germany without prejudice, to live together without fear. That is what we must stand for. I believe it is our responsibility to counter hate-filled violence with what the philosopher Susan Neiman called moral clarity. And this certainly includes the actions of the state based on the rule of law. Our Minister for Justice, Minister Heiko Maas, is calling for tougher punishments for racist and xenophobic crimes. I support this very much. But moral clarity starts before that point, by refusing to accept hatred and violence on Germany's streets, by rejecting justifications drawn from international crises and conflicts. This clarity of thought starts by not allowing cultural origins to serve as an excuse for wrongful acts. Our legal culture is based on the concept of the responsible individual. It means that every adult has to answer for his or her actions. A society of immigration, and Germany has long been a country of immigration, can only stay together if we defend this universal law. It is true that the recollection of the genocide of the Jews of Europe is being changed by Germany's development into a country of immigration. 1 person in 5 who lives in our country today either immigrated him or herself or has parents or grandparents who immigrated here. Many Germans of my generation are driven by the following conviction: the fact that our own parents grew up in Nazi Germany means that we have an obligation never to forget the crimes done in the name of our country. Now more and more people whose families have different roots are asking, what does National Socialism and Nazis have to do with me? My parents came from Turkey or from the former Yugoslavia. I can only say in response, anyone who immigrates into Germany, anyone who applies for citizenship here, must face up to our country's past. Germany is not just about fast cars and good jobs. Germany is also about the lessons we learned from a disastrous past. It is about rules governing how we want to live together. It is about rules governing how we want to handle minorities. It is about rules governing how Germany can live in peace with its neighbors. Anyone who pretends they have nothing to do with that their ancestors weren't born here, is only using the same arguments as those who claim that you can only become German by birth. We, on the other hand, say that you can become a German by deciding to live here permanently. Today, we welcome those who wish to make this country their home and to bring their country forward. The Bundestag has just changed the Nationality Act to make it easier for hundreds of thousands of young immigrants to become Germans without the need to deny their cultural origins. But a modern Nationality Act also means that people have to assume responsibility for the society in which they want to live. Of course, it's also true that we need to do more in Germany to ensure participation, justice, social cohesion. After all, a sense of powerlessness is a breeding ground for hatred. We need to open up ways to ensure that people can belong to society as equals. Educational opportunities are the key. Education takes people out of the narrow worlds of prejudice. It can help people to overcome cultural boundaries and to understand international conflicts better. Ladies and gentlemen, the World Jewish Congress assured Israel of its solidarity during the last conflict in the Gaza Strip. Mr. Lauder justified this by saying that the World Jewish Congress wants to show the State of Israel and its citizens that they are not standing alone and that Jews stand side by side around the world. I should add the following point. Israel can also expect solidarity from my country, from Germany. Let me quote from Johannes Raus, the former president of the Federal Republic and also Social Democrat, speech to the Knesset in the year 2000. He said, "Remembrance would be an empty gesture were it not accompanied by responsible action. Shared responsibility for Israel has, since the foundation of our state, been a basic tenet of Germany's foreign policy. This has not changed in any way. For me, that also means that Germany will not stand and watch as Hamas and other radicals in the Middle East fight openly for the total destruction of Israel. I can assure you that this remains the consensus of almost all the democratic forces in Germany. Of course, as in every liberal society in which freedom of opinion is a natural part of life, there is also political criticism in Germany of Israel's actions in Gaza and the West Bank. And of course, also in my opinion, there are some political decisions in Israel which have to be criticized, especially the development of the settlements. Everyone has the right to demonstrate in Germany against our government, but also everybody has the right to demonstrate, to criticize the policy of another country. But nothing can be used as an excuse for the terrorist attacks of Hamas. No political decision of Israel governments can be an excuse for killing children. So it is clear and is confirmed by the latest political events that Israel's right to exist is still being challenged by its opponents. The capacity to defend oneself is a legitimate interest and one which I will always support. For the German government and the parties forming it, Israel's right to exist within secure borders forms the starting point in the search for a peaceful solution in the Middle East. Germany and its European partners believe that there are two key elements for a permanent solution. The first and most important element is the security of Israel and its population. Not least, this includes the control of possible arms shipments to Gaza or to the West Bank. And of course, secondly, the easing of living conditions for the people in Gaza and in the West Bank, and the economic development for the Palestinian territories. I believe that the Palestinians' right to political self-determination must also form part of the solution. A permanent solution in the Middle East conflict requires a comprehensive political process in which the open status questions have to be resolved and which leads to a two-state solution. I am well aware that this solution has seemed less and less likely over the last few years. Nevertheless, I still believe that we cannot let it drop without giving up all hope for a peaceful solution. It is my desire that we should not be entirely deprived of this idea of a peaceful world by the bitter realities of today's situation. It is my hope that it will be possible to reconcile the security of Israel with the Palestinians' right for an own state. Back in the 1960s, Hannah Arendt wrote a far-sighted essay entitled Peace or Armistice in the Middle East. As politicians, we should want more than just an armistice. We should keep trying to make peace possible. As a realist, I am convinced that workable peace in the Middle East will only be possible if there is a fair balance of interests. A stabilization of the situation in Israel and Palestine is more than desirable, not least in view of the developments in the region. After all, we are currently witnessing how the spread of the so-called Islamic State is dramatically changing the situation in the Middle East. The public display of cruelty by this extreme Islamist demands a response. Germany is prepared to give effective help in this acute emergency, and we are ready to do all we can to support fresh political initiatives for the stabilization of the region. Let me finish on a rather more optimistic note. At our rally at the Brandenburg Gate, we gave a signal of solidarity, and we underlined that things that have come to unite us over the last few decades. Jewish life belongs to Germany. Rabbis are being trained in our country again, and the cultural, political, economic exchange between Israel and Germany is very intense. A Hebrew newspaper was just recently established in Berlin again. More and more Israelis are coming to Germany, in particular to Berlin. Germans and Israelis work parties and argue together. This is a good news. I think yesterday's signal was a good signal for working together and to build on this grounds our common future. Thank you very much for your attention.